the strength of us on the inside beating the monsters, whether they're on the inside or the outside. We can do it better together than we can do it alone.
Hello, boils and ghouls. It's your old pal, John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper. And I want to welcome my good fiends of the Horror Heals podcast. Is horror good for mental wellness? But of course it is. I delight in the delicious deaths of pitiful people on the silver screen. So get ready for a hell of a good time with my new fiends, Corey and Kendall, on the Horror Heals podcast.
Welcome back to Horror Heals. If you haven't listened to part 1 of DonnaJean's incredible story, hit pause right now, go check it out, and then come back. Seriously, you're going to need the context for how awesome she is. In part 1, we learned about DonnaJean's tough-as-nails attitude, her ability to turn life's absolute worst into pure gold, and her special knack for making you feel like you've been best friends forever, even if you just met her at the Monster-Mania VIP table. DonnaJean isn't just surviving, she's thriving in the most DonnaJean way possible, making life better for the horror community, adults with disabilities, and anyone lucky enough to cross her path. And if you love hearing about the behind-the-scenes magic at horror conventions, buckle up. This episode has Matthew Lillard hugging fans, Dee Wallace spreading love, and Kane Hodder being, well, Kane Hodder. Let's dive in.
I had one woman come up to me this past show, and that was amazing to me. And she said, "Oh, someone else told me I had to meet you because you were just so nice. You're so kind." And I thought, oh, what a nice thing. They're not saying go and meet Matthew Lillard because he's amazing, but he is, by the way. But wow, somebody took the time to mention she should say hello to me. That's what an honor that is. That's another thing. Working at the line. If any of people watching this are contemplating volunteering at Monster-Mania or at any other show, one of the neat things that happened was Matthew Lillard's table was right next to the VIP skip the line table at this last show. And we just saw people, somebody in a wheelchair, he walked from his line to the next line they wanted to be with. He hugged everybody and listened to them and talked to them. And it was just such an amazing thing. I didn't have a chance to stay and talk to him myself. I have before, but that was okay because the interactions he had with everybody were so special for them. And you could tell that it wasn't like he was just doing it. He was doing this and he meant it because it's who he is. So that was just such an amazing thing to see.
Well, you can really sense who's genuine and who's not, there. And I've had a couple of not great interactions that were a little disappointing, and again, you don't know what's going on in the moment with that individual. So you try not to be too hard on them, and just, then you just brush it off, They say don't meet your heroes, but I disagree with that because, 99% of them are fantastic and they take the time and they do the stuff, I'm sure you've met Dee Wallace and she's just Dee Wallace. One of the best with the fans, just gives because she's getting this love back, Who doesn't want more love in their life?
One of the things I'm dealing with right now, and I actually think at this point, it's just going to be a matter of finding out what's there and what to be done with it, even if it's just watching things or exercise or whatever. But I've had a cough since last Christmas. So I talked to, I being a type 1 diabetic and having 50% kidney function due to that, I get a full renal panel done quarterly. So when I was in talking to my doctor, I said, by the way, I've had this cough since about last Christmas. So he sent me for a CT scan and said, okay, we see something. I don't see any cancer or any tumor. Your lungs look clear, but there's something going on with your heart. So he sent me to see a cardiologist. The cardiologist said, I believe that there's calcification around the valves with the heart. So they sent me for a stress test. And the stress test did not come back with anything major. So I'm going for an echocardiogram next week. And I'm not sure because I've been a type 1 diabetic my whole life. If somebody tells me, oh, they're thirsty and they're peeing a lot, I'm like, what's your blood sugar? You know, if somebody is having like a really anxious time, I'm kind of like, okay, I don't have clinical anxiety, but I have PTSD. So I understand this. I'm like, okay, do you need a minute? Do you need a hug? Do you want to, sit? But I don't know anything about the heart because it's new to me. So I'm kind of waiting to find out. I was kind of hoping if we found something out, it would be something to help back with my memory because ever since the coma, my memory is like, so if I'm ever talking to somebody and I forget their name, I'm so bad with names. I always was, and since the coma, I'm even worse. But it's one of those things like we got to find out what it is and then do whatever we got to do. I know I'm 61 years old. I know I'm going to get something at some point I'm not going to get better from because we all do. And when I went in for the lung surgery with the cancer, they gave me a 6% chance of not living through the surgery because of my diabetes and all the other issues. And interestingly, the surgeon said, and your kidneys are going to shut down and you will wake up in the ICU. We want you to know that. Well, they didn't and I didn't. And I just woke up in the room. It's kind of amazing that I'm as healthy as I am. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah.
But
well, I think part of it is just, you've got a lot of positivity around you and you push that out into the world. So, that could be very healing as well, and of course the name of the show is Horror Heals.
Exactly.
We truly believe
and
that.
Cats help.
Oh, yes.
That was my Hibble. I lost him to cancer 2 years ago.
Oh.
But he's always with me.
Yep.
Horror cats.
Ours are literally with us right now because they don't let us get through these interviews alone. So we've got 6 dogs with us right now, and they're just fortunately being quiet. Awesome. And then we have 2 kitties in their room. Yep.
I love you both. You're my kind of crazy people.
Thank you. Yeah. Like horror and pets, I think, are our top 2 pets.
A woman came into my office the other day, and Corey made me this great collage photo of our pets and our best friend's huge Rottweilers in one of the photos too. But the woman came into my office, she's like, "Are these all yours?" as if to say that was not appropriate. And I was like, "Yep, except that great big one. Everybody else is ours." It was just comical, and she was like, "Okay, then." I was like, some people have children, and we have a whole bunch of these furry children.
So I think I already know the answer to this question without even asking it, but because you mentioned you were a shy child, but you have such a fantastic rapport with people at the con. I guess that's maybe just because I know my shyness kind of melts away when I'm there. Of course, it helps that I'm wearing the crazy suits that people will come up to me and compliment me in that way. That's the conversation starter. But was your rapport with the guests always as easy as it is with attendees?
The weird thing about my shyness is after I stopped breathing when I was 23 with the diabetes and the alcoholic drinking, when I came back from that, because I did have this out-of-body experience thing, I was not shy anymore. Because for some reason, I saw the connectedness of everybody because I was loved, but I didn't feel like I was loved. I felt weird. I felt like a freak, everybody is just whatever, watching whatever they're watching on TV or listening to the radio. And I'm reading Nietzsche and, all this kind of weird stuff. But when that happened, I did see the connectedness of everybody, and the connectedness in a crazy way, and I don't mean romantically, is love. And I did start to see the world that way. So when I did my first interview, this is kind of a jump for that reason. When I did my first interview was with Nathan Basil. I was sitting at the Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon table with he and Angela Goethals, who I have both come to absolutely love and adore and consider friends. And I'm honored to know them. They're such good people. And I just out of the top of my head thought, hey, Nathan, I'm kind of watching you with all these people, and people who are not here aren't hearing it. Is it okay if I do an interview with you? He was like, sure. So, and actually how my show got the name of Coffee House of Horror this was pre-pandemic. So I just stopped at Dunkin' Donuts on my way in, got us both a big coffee. And then that same weekend was the first interview I did with David Howard Thornton, and was the first interview I did with Felissa Rose. And I've become friends with all of them, and I brought them all coffee. So when the pandemic did happen and we started doing interviews online, and it was my editor, who is on Nerdbox, who suggested we start to do interviews to kind of keep people connected. So it became the Coffee House of Horror, because I always brought people coffee in the morning when I was interviewing them. And to answer your question, yes, I like people. I'm interested in people. My daughter is an illustrator, and I'm amazed by her talent. Felissa Rose is an actor, and I am amazed by her talent. And I think the fact that I also have to jump back. I'm so sorry. When I was recovering from the cancer surgery was when Walking Dead was first out. And my husband actually connected me with Walking Dead, and my daughter connected me with Doctor Who. And my daughter got me the new Doctor Who, starting from with Christopher Eccles. And I fell in love with David Tennant. Doesn't everybody? So between Doctor Who and my husband getting me into The Walking Dead, I found so much hope. After the surgery, they had to cut through all the nerves and muscles. And when they started to wake up, I've always had a high pain tolerance. I thought I did. It was a pain I really can't describe. I felt like my skin was dried out paper and I couldn't move in any way. And they didn't want to put me on any more serious medication to block that from my brain in case something went wrong. And I was like, but it already hurts this much. How do I, what else can go wrong? But between the Doctor Who and The Walking Dead, and then my husband, and he kind of blames himself now for my love of horror conventions and going to so many conventions, he took me to my first Walker Stalker. And so that was kind of between that and then the Monster-Manias. But the Walker Stalkers, and meeting some of them, and the kindness and the humility of so many of them, and the sacrifice my husband has made ever since then, knowing now that I'm going to be going away so many weekends. Carrie Payton, who played Ezekiel on Walking Dead, it was the anniversary of when I first met him, was the anniversary of my cancer surgery. I think I was like a year cancer-free or something like that. His father was dealing with cancer, and he and I started talking, and we're both crying, and we were hugging. And ever since then, he just told me, whenever you see me, you just come up to my table. And so I kind of had weird openings with the celebrities, because I never put people in different categories separate from myself, while at the same time, I honor and respect the talent that they have that got them the recognition that they got and that they deserved.
It would be absolutely cruel on our part to ask you who your favorite guest is.
It's tough, because those couple of people are people I've come to consider friends, so it's a very different, like if there's only one person that I met, and I actually had a very disappointing experience meeting, and this was in my Walker Stalker days, and I'm not going to say who it is, because he may have been having a bad day. But so when I meet somebody new, I also, it probably helps. For 10 years, I've worked caring for adults with intellectual disabilities in a personal care home. For that, I did volunteer work with folks in the area psychiatric hospital. I have mental illness in my family, and there's been violence in my family due to the mental illness. So it was my way, when I was in my mid-20s, of trying to understand it as best as I could, was getting in to do volunteer work. So really what it comes down to is I try not to have high expectations for somebody that I haven't met yet, because I don't know if they're going to be as awesome as I hope that they will be. But at the same time, I also don't know what else they have going on. If somebody meets me and my blood sugars are running down in the 40s and I can't talk to them, and I'm sitting and shoving, hard candy in my mouth, I would probably appear to be very different than if my blood sugars are fine. So that's how I kind of think about somebody who has anxiety or any kind of a mental illness. We don't know what's going on with them, But I definitely have people that I'm so glad that I met that I do hope I have the opportunity to see again.
Well, the final question that we ask every guest is, who is your favorite final person in a horror movie?
Oh my gosh. That's tough because I do have a couple of favorite final girls. It would be hard for me not to mention Adrienne King. It would be hard for me at this point not to mention Lauren Lavera. But I have to say, I'll preface it with saying two of my three cats are named Jonesy and Ripley. So I have to stick with Ripley. She's, to me, she's kind of what it's all about.
Yeah.
Well, great answer. Thank you for mentioning Adrienne King, because that's Kendall's favorite, and she's been on the show, and she's just remarkable.
Yeah.
It's just great.
I adore her character, and I adore the woman. So
Yeah. And I don't know what it is. I just have this real affinity for Friday the 13th. There are so many great franchises, but that's just one that we go back to probably way too often.
Yeah. I bet a 2 months doesn't go by without us watching at least one of them.
No way.
And that's a lot to say if we're watching a horror movie every day. And there's so many new ones, so many great ones.
I know I have a lot of indie filmmaker friends, and I actually, of the interviews that I have to line up, there are 3 indie filmmaker friends that have all requested interviews, and I am so behind on being able to watch them just because it's my life. I don't have, and my husband is also not too much into some of the indie stuff, and he's not completely into horror the way I am. So if he's going to be home and we're going to try to watch something together, it's probably not going to be one of those because we wanted to. So really just the time factor.
Right.
I don't have enough time.
Well, I was only able to make it out to 1 Monster-Mania this year, but my goal is to hit at least 2 next year and hopefully get Kendall out to 1. She's not big on the crowd, so I don't know if Cherry Hill would be a good option, but maybe Oaks, Pennsylvania might be better, because I imagine there's some spaces where you can just at least sort of, since it's a convention center, kind of get away from the throngs of people.
There's also a show that I've come to very, very much like and love the owners, Harry Carpenter and his wife, Audrey. They're such good people, and they have a show called Fright Reads. Last year, I worked with Bill Perry, who was an actor and stuntman and author of The People Under the Stairs, and they had a People Under the Stairs reunion. The year before, they had Linnea Quigley, so I was able to work with her. And I know that they're working at growing a bit this coming year, but it's not a mega convention size, something that you'd think about. And it's such good people. It's a good show, Plus, I'll be there.
Awesome. Well, I knew this was going to be a lot of fun, but we really appreciate your openness for sharing your story. That's why we're doing this, to help people. We don't know what everybody's going through, but we certainly have shared experiences. Aside from just a shared love of horror, I think, we all have a little bit of anxiety, worries, health stuff, but horror definitely helps in so many ways.
The strength of us on the inside beating the monsters, whether they're on the inside or the outside. We can do it better together than we can do it alone.
For sure.
So thank you guys so much for doing this.
Yeah. Thank you so much. DonnaJean is the kind of person who makes you believe in the good in people again. She's seen it all, done it all, and somehow she still finds ways to make the world brighter for everyone she meets. And speaking of brightness, DonnaJean, you shared some news that had us fist pumping and maybe tearing up just a little. The health scare you mentioned earlier in this episode? Total fluke. The blood work came back normal and the doctors gave you a clean bill of health. Can we all just take a second to appreciate this? Not only is DonnaJean a fighter, but she's also proof that sometimes the universe decides to give us a break. And we're so glad for it. DonnaJean, you are an absolute legend, and it's been an honor having you on the show. To all our listeners, whether you're navigating life's curveballs or just need a reminder that kindness and community still exist, DonnaJean's story is for you. And remember, as DonnaJean proves, the real monsters aren't always scary. They can be pretty wonderful too. Oh, and don't forget, when someone asks, is horror good for mental wellness? You tell them, of course it is. The Horror Heals podcast is produced and presented by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage, LLC.